Yep.
I'm like, I wonder who made that comment. Hello, Troy. How's it going?
Why are you doing this? Okay.
She's yelling at her computer.
I am.
Throw
It's
it.
showing you something that it's not showing me.
Throw it so it'll work better.
Throw it?
Yeah.
Is that what works?
You're in the right spot.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul.
How you doing?
Good. Your building's looking good.
Yeah, looking better.
Yeah.
Much better. Now I see what you see.
How's Melissa tonight?
Good.
Where's the food?
Getting
It's
used to
in
new
the
glasses
room
and
back
stuff
there.
from prescriptions. I have a little bit of a headache because my brain is kind of working on it. But I can see better, so that's good.
Oh, yeah.
Brain
Just south of the Dollar General
Yeah, there's
on Main Street, you know where that retention pond is right there? There's a stretch of sidewalk that go from where you enter the Dollar General to 66. There's like that little stretch. I'd like to know who's responsible for clearing that, because that whole section is one big old ice rink. It looks like it didn't even get shoveled. So I don't know if it's the store owner's responsibility or.
Probably easement, right away area.
Yeah.
So it's probably, our responsibility or responsibility.
If it's CDOT, never mind.
How y'all doing?
Okay, I need
That's right, I have no faith in that. Well, it's like right in the middle of 66 and Main Street. I mean, literally right in the middle of the
Hey, Essie,
intersection.
how you doing?
There's a big old pothole that's open up. And part of that has probably come from the amount of traffic the last couple days.
How are you?
And just south of 66 on Main, where you turn in to go to the bank and the gas station, that entrance has been so bad.
How are you, hon?
There's so many potholes there, I mean, literally, it's just one big crater.
To the one in
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
Just south of 66 on Main Street.
Hey,
So
ladies.
you go south of 66.
That's the bank.
Yeah, and then you turn in, right before Bella Vista. Yeah, that whole thing is just. From what I understand, Andrew was telling me that is the gas station's responsibility. James Road repair.
I don't know, I think that road is still.
I had guessed it. I thought it was CDOT, yeah.
See, that was always.
Used to be that you had that.
Yeah, I know.
Hello, Paul.
How are you doing, Curtis? We'll just break.
Drive by that building just about every day and see. That back end where you're putting the residents in, are you gonna replace the roof on that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's spring. But it's gonna be like one bedroom.
I'm encroaching. Well, I smack you right on the face.
And what's gonna be about 600 square feet? What's the front?
That'd be enough.
There is?
Two lots.
Yeah, oh, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Reggie?
Reggie, how you doing? Good. Wow.
Your wife's working hard on the splash pad.
Yeah, hopefully it's gonna happen, huh?
That's like something happened right away.
I know. Because that's one thing I wanted to see happen, so.
Girl, I can't wait to find these swimsuits.
Good, all right.
There you go.
Stop it right now.
Mind, I'm trying to eat
You don't
here.
need to go there. Speaking of which, if y'all don't mind, I am gonna go ahead and get started. I know I only have you until 7:30. I'd like to make the best use of your time possible. As you probably already know, this is really informal. At any time, if you want to grab something extra to eat, or go to the bathroom, or stretch, or whatever you need to do, take a phone call, please do that. You're not going to bother me in the least. You're not going to bother the process in the least. And we have an agenda tonight that I'll just sort of roll with the flow. My goal tonight is to cover the data from the survey results with you, but not in depth. It's going to be a fairly high-level overview. If you want to read any of the data, I'm happy to send it back out to anybody at all. We have it here at Town Hall in printed format that you can look at. So there's any number of backup documentation and data that we're going to talk about tonight in high-level detail. So if you want to go a little bit more into depth, just make sure you ask me, and we can do that at any point. What I've tried to do with that data is create an executive report that sort of hits those highlights, and this would be the time to talk about whether or not I was accurate based on your reading of the data, if you think I missed anything, all of those things. After we get done with that, which will be about the first half an hour, what I really want to do with you tonight is basically create the first steps in the strategic plan itself. And those first steps are going to be to talk about projects and goals. And we'll go over that in some more detail when we hit that stage, but a project is exactly what you'd imagine. Build a splash pool, build a splash pad. That's a project. The goal is probably 4 or 5 steps higher than that. Something along the line of provide recreational opportunities for multi-generational families in Platteville. Something really kind of big and broad. A project is usually very specific and very tangible. So that's my goal tonight. If we make it all the way through there, and we might, we'll have some time left over to talk again about the vision of what it is we're trying to create overall in Platteville. But if we don't, not to worry. We have at least 1 and possibly 2 more meetings after Christmas and the New Year that we can talk about it. And the way I'm going to spend my time after this meeting, during this break of about a month before I talk to you again, is actually putting some of this documentation into the plan so you'll have a draft to look at next time as well and comment on. As you know, this time frame is generally speaking by the end of February. We want to bring something back to the town board that they can take a look at and approve. So that's my general time frame. We did skip a meeting because we didn't have data, and that's why I say we had planned 1 more meeting, but now we have an extra one kind of in the wings if we need it, so we might actually end up having a couple more meetings. There's also 1 more community meeting coming up in February after you see the plan and we comment on it and refine it, to have a community meeting, a public meeting where we talk about the plan too, to make sure, again, we didn't miss anything, that everybody understands what the plan means. So that's my goal for tonight in the next hour and 20 minutes or so. As always, if you want to stay later, I'm here. If you want to leave early, feel free. I promise not to make fun of you or write your name down. That's what Mary's going to do. So it's her job to make fun of you and write your name down. So, I always like to start with introductions. I'm going to go first tonight, and then I'm going to start randomly. I'm just going to start there. I like that corner. We'll just move around. But what I'd like you to do is just tell me after I get done with my introduction, is just say your name, a little bit about your I'm sure everybody knows everybody, except for me, right? I only know some of you at this point. A little bit about your background, and anything else you might want to share. So I am Cheryl Trent. I'm the consultant helping the town with this economic development plan. I live in Fort Collins, but don't hold that against me. I'm originally from Seattle, and my background is almost exclusively in public government, local, city, county government, serving as whatever they told me to do at the time, whatever my board wanted me to do. I ended up finishing out that part of my career in Evans as the Community and Economic Development Director. And about 10 years ago, I started doing this kind of work for clients because I was very frustrated with our strategic planning process. They created beautiful, beautiful plans, but they didn't really reflect what the community wanted. It was more what the consultant wanted. And they were great ideas. They were actually very well thought out ideas, but some of them just weren't feasible for our community. It just wasn't gonna happen. And so I thought to myself, as I often do, just ask my husband, I can do this better than that. And here I am. So that's what I specialize in, is facilitating these kinds of conversations around strategic long-range plans. And I'm happy to answer any questions. As always, you can email me or go onto the website, whatever you might need from me, I'm happy to provide. So I'm gonna turn it in your direction.
Reggie Huntington, I've been a resident for 25 years. My kids grew up here, went to school here. I'm a retired recreation director, teacher, and coach, so.
Hence the recreation.
Yes. Yes.
Mike Cowper, I've been a resident for 25 years. I've been involved in town government, currently on the planning commission.
And proud owner of a new swimsuit.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Okay. Curtis Mork, I've been here for 13 years, been on the Platteville Lions Club since I moved here, very involved in the community.
Troy Blum, town trustee, and been here 5 years, and recently retired Army.
Go Navy, beat Army.
Oh. You're gonna get this year again.
I know.
I'm Paul Eisenach. I grew up here, and I lived here at one time. I don't live in town now. I live outside of town. But, yeah.
Rick Free, you've been here for about 20 years. I don't live very well outside of town by Paul. Used to own the Doubletree.
Oh, okay.
Kind of know everybody in town.
Thank you.
Rich Smith, I chair the planning commission. I've been in town for about 13 years.
I'm Jeff Cochran. I'm not a resident of Platteville, but was asked to be on the steering committee because I was involved with the school district for a number of years, and also the fire inspector here for the district.
I'm Melissa Kendrick, and I'm the town planner, which I have been for about the past 5 years.
Hi, my name is Aida Zamora, and I've been here for 49 years in town, so I've been a housewife, taking care of my kids, my grandkids, family's kids, and I enjoy it. Jessie Raphael, retired secretary for the school district. I've been here over 40 years.
Thank you. I like the nice mix we're getting. You know, not everybody can make every meeting, which is perfectly fine. And any meetings that you can't make, you can always read the notes. I try to send you guys out notes and minutes afterwards. Let's see if I can't turn the light down so you can see this just a little bit better. So, ooh, I don't want to put you to sleep. I'm gonna let Tori do that. Now that I just like created, oh, that's much better.
A little bit of subdued lighting there.
So let's see if this will bring it back up for me. It was on the screen, and now it doesn't like me anymore. But what I wanted to do was cover that executive summary that I had written about what I think the data is telling us. And while it's thinking about whether or not it can talk to me, one thing I will say is that you'll probably recall a few meetings ago, we went over what the comp plan, that's the comprehensive plan for the town. We just always call it the comp plan, it's easier to say. What that detailed. And the town did this really great update to the comp plan a few years ago, and it's super easy to read, and it's a nice, short document, which many of them are not. And what it did was it laid out some of the bigger picture areas of focus that the town had been working on and through. And I had mentioned to you at the time that if it were possible, I was going to try to see if we couldn't coordinate the economic development strategic plan along those same lines. And one thing I will say is yes, it was definitely possible to take a look at the data that we got from the community feedback and the surveys and all of those postcards and sticky notes and make it align with some of the same things that are in the comprehensive plan. I think there were some new things that cropped up or showed up in the survey data that the comp plan didn't necessarily address, but I think that's because your comprehensive plan deals a lot with growth. It doesn't deal with some of the specifics around economic development and some of these specific projects we'll probably talk about tonight. So you're going to see some things that weren't necessarily in the comp plan, But I do like the fact that it ties in, because from my perspective, what it means was that foundation that you guys have been working on for several years now is a sound foundation. A lot of the survey data just validated some of the work that you have already done and that you're currently doing. And then I think there are a few new things going on. So while I'm waiting for the technology to catch up with me, there were a couple really pretty pictures. See, pretty pictures. And by the way, I do know that we're still doing this photo contest. I have been looking for photos of Platteville to put into your plan. One of the jobs I have for you is not just your strategic plan, it's to create a marketing document for you. And the best way to tell a picture is through visuals, photos. And so if you have any good photos of Platteville, please get them to Mary, and we'll get your permission, but we'll likely try to reproduce them in the plan in some fashion to try to make that happen. This is not going to talk to me tonight, which is disconcerting because there's a lot of data. So let's do this. I'll do it one more time while I'm talking to you. So, just an overview of how we collected all this data. How we collected all this data was we created an online survey, one just for the community in general, and then one for specifically one for the business owners. We had over 60 responses to the community survey, the online one, and we had about 5 responses to the business survey. We also created a postcard, and interesting to me, it's always interesting to see what works in some communities versus others. This community seemed to respond really well to the postcard. We printed it in both English and Spanish, and we had the opportunity to, I think Adrian took it to the school and sent a whole bunch home through the school. And we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses. The positive is that you had hundreds and hundreds of responses. The negative was I had to hand her all that data. Thank you very much. I had this chiropractor. And then we had some sticky notes that we had made, and then we've done whiteboard work throughout the community. We've also done the work at the community meetings. So all of that is this data. And I have one spreadsheet that you've probably seen that has all of that data compiled. And then I have all of the PDFs from the community survey, and I have all of the rest of that information. It's clearly not going to show it to me, so I'm going to tell you what I think as we go through this. So to set the stage, your comp plan had several areas. And what Melissa had done for me first is we went through the comp plan and we said, what do we think are some of these main areas that we might see reflected in your strategic plan? So, I'm going to handwrite this down for you. It's going to take me just a fair bit longer. The most obvious one, which shouldn't surprise anyone that was in your comp plan, was economic development. And there were several areas under economic development that were covered. And the survey clearly reflected that idea of we do want economic development. And if you'll recall my conversation with you about what economic development is, it's pretty much anything that improves your life. So economic development could be fixing the potholes in the road. It could be a new water and sewer plant. It could be better Wi-Fi. It could be a park. It could be a new business. It could be any of those things, anything that makes your life better. So the comp plan looked at economic development really in this area of housing and how do you attract new businesses. The second area that the comp plan talked about was listed as environment. And for them, environment was really the oil and gas opportunities. And I think our survey expanded on that just a little bit. The third area in the comp plan was growth management. And that's really how big are you going to grow? And what kind of issues are you going to have with that growth? Where are you going to zone sort of heavy industrial versus light industrial versus housing? And again, I think our survey reflected that, but it also added a few things for us. And then this one was really very, very clear. The comp plan calls it community character. And we talked a lot about this already, that small town feeling. And then finally, the comp plan has something called parks and recreation in it that fit very nicely. So when I took a look at the survey data, what I saw under the economic development side, besides what your comp plan already talked about, was I saw this concept of needing some kind of they typically will call them, there's an acronym which is easy to remember, BEAR. They'll typically call it a BEAR program. And BEAR just means business expansion, attraction, and retention. So if you have a current business that wants to expand, the business surveys that we took said, yes, they intend to stay in Platteville, they don't intend to move. That was one of our questions. And we asked them, do you intend to, grow over the course of the next 3 to 5 years? All 5 of them said yes. So certainly some sort of business expansion support is going to be critical. And then I think everybody agrees that we want to attract some new types of businesses. And one of our questions, of course, was what type of business should that be? So I'm going to get back to that. But that attraction of new businesses. And the other thing that's usually important, and I think it is in this case too, is to retain those businesses that you currently have. You don't really want to lose. Some people may want to lose some of them, but as a general rule, you want to retain the businesses that you currently have. So a BEAR program was something that the survey clearly spoke to me about. And then there are some really specific business opportunities that people really want to see. No shock to you guys, it's going to be groceries and it's going to be restaurants. Those are the 2 main things that came to the forefront. And I do want to talk a little bit about both of those as we move forward. There was some conversation around wanting some new housing, housing to be continued to be built. There didn't seem to be any strong feelings about exactly what kind of housing. We did say, do you have any ideas about, say, maybe it's more apartments or condos, maybe it's more geared toward patio homes where you don't have a lot of outdoor work, maybe more senior type housing, maybe housing for the first time homeowner. There didn't seem to be any strong responses or feelings about that, but we did have an answer to that question. When we said, for example, what do you think would be good things to do to help economic development in Platteville, one of the things that continued to come up was some sort of incentive program. That means something different to everybody, but in most cases it means that somehow you're going to figure out a way to make it easier and more profitable for people to locate businesses in Platteville. Sometimes incentives are you share their sales tax back with them. Sometimes incentives are fast tracking a permitting process, so they get the permit faster, time being money. Sometimes you can either delay or offset some of the fees that are charged. Every community is different, but an incentive program came to the forefront there. And then it was very clear that people thought that we needed to market Platteville, to tell people about us. And I think the town board was already on top of that because, as I mentioned, they want me to do a marketing brochure. So that'll be fun to do. One of the things that you always try to do is you try to reflect who the community is. And I might not get it right the first time, but I'm building it on the back of all of this information that you've given me. And so I'm trying to create a document that visually represents you as well as the data in it tells the story. Hence that need for maybe some photos that you might have. So I do know that one of the questions I had before I forget, Troy, was that historic photo that you have out there on the wall, if we might be able to use that even as a backdrop. I think that would be pretty cool.
Sure, absolutely.
And then, under the environment, really I mentioned what the comp plan meant was the oil and gas. And that's still, obviously, that's still a major part of Platteville, and I think it will continue to be so. We all know it waxes and wanes. Regardless, Platteville is proud of its agricultural and oil energy heritage. And I think you should be proud. I think that's something that makes you different and is what they call in the business, obviously, it's a differentiator. How do I stand out from somebody else? I figure out what's different or unique. That's definitely something that's different or unique. One of the people I interviewed told me that those silos, those grain mills, are the only organic storage for grain like west of the Mississippi. I mean, it's something crazy that you have here in Platteville that I never knew about until he told it to me. So those types of things that are different, that are unique, that are selling points, I think are something that the survey reflected as well. And then railroad access. That's another very big deal. It's both environmental and economic because with rail access, which not many people have, you can bring businesses that need that rail access to the area. And it's also just, it is what it is. I mean, right? You live with the railroad, you kind of get used to it, and many people actually find that a very quaint part of living in a town like this. That is until you get woken up at 3 a.m. by Amtrak, but that's a different story.
Sorry.
So, undergrowth management for me, the biggest issue here that the survey reflected was location. When I would ask, why did you move here? Why did you stay here? What do you think is super cool about Platteville? Location, location, location. After that, or in conjunction with that, obviously, is this small town feel. But under growth management, there's a lot of conversation about the location, the railroad access being a part of that growth management, especially as it relates to traffic. Because traffic, you know, it's different, right? If you were in LA and you moved here, you'd say, oh my God, there's no traffic, this is wonderful. If you grew up here, you'd say, oh my God, the traffic is terrible. And especially access to and across 85, that seems to be more and more problematic, and I think that will only continue to be so. And I know CDOT has rules and guidelines and plans for access points to and from and traffic across 85. But to access anything east of here, you've got to obviously cross 85, and that's highly problematic, especially since you have a railroad in the way as well. The railroad's probably more problematic than CDOT, quite frankly. They're their own government entity, put it that way. And then there was a conversation around infrastructure, what I call the basics: roads, water, and sewer. People felt very strongly in the survey that the biggest part of growth management, outside of the issues we've talked about that may be slightly beyond our control, like the railroad or CDOT, it's your own infrastructure, your water, sewer, waste management, roads, sidewalks, lights, those types of things. I think we all know what the survey said about community character, because you heard it time and again in all of our meetings. It was that small town feeling. And you'll know that one of the questions I asked was, what does that look like? What does that feel like? That was our last meeting, was sort of describe to me what that means. And a lot of it is the lifestyle, sort of the family-friendly type lifestyle. But people also mentioned in the survey a whole lot about your historical buildings. And they felt that with some investment into the downtown, that charm of Platteville could be both preserved and, I think, enhanced. And often that means something along the line of a facade program, meaning that there's some sort of matching grant as small as you might want it to be. I've seen them as small as $500 or $250, where you match a building owner who wants to put in a new sign or new paint or put in a new pot or build a fence or anything like that that improves the look of their building. And then finally, under this area of parks and recreation, we're laughing about the splash pad, but that was something that came up during that Main Street, I guess you could call it Main Street, but it was the study that the university came in and did in your downtown and said what it could look like. The splash pad was the community received that concept very well. And that's what we saw in the survey, amenities. We want a recreation center, came up multiple times. I want to touch base along with the grocery store and the restaurants about a rec center. But trails, activities, things like the splash pad, those types of things were mentioned time and again in the survey as something that people really felt would be helpful and beneficial. That's what they'd like to see. So my takeaways from this were that you've got some really great existing unique features that we can capitalize on, build on, leverage, enhance, any old word you want to throw in that direction. And I think that's really important to underline that and underscore that with the fact that it appears to be the people that are the most important driving factor behind some of these unique characteristics. That small town feel, welcoming, friendly, safe, people know everybody. You might not know everybody anymore, you're pretty big now, right? But that ability to know your neighbors and your neighbors' kids and your grandkids know their grandkids and all of those situations, that seems to be the real underscore factor and takeaway for me, is that it's the people that drive the uniqueness of the relationships in Platteville. So if we're going to try to go out and attract new people, new housing, new developers, new businesses, new investment, we want to attract the right kind of people. Because the wrong kind of people just aren't going to get us. They're going to say it. How many times have you seen this in Will County especially? Some new housing development goes in, somebody moves here because they like the lifestyle, and then they start complaining about the smell, because you know there are cows somewhere in the neighborhood. Remember when the cows were here before you were, but what do you think creates this lifestyle? The cows, people. It's agriculture. So it's always been a little frustrating to me to have that cycle. We just need to make sure we attract people who understand that's part of living in a community like this. There's traffic, there's oil and gas, there are trucks, there's agriculture, you know, all of those things that make us unique. We need to make sure we attract people like that. And then this idea that there's always room for improvement. So a couple of the questions that I asked were, what would you change or improve about downtown specifically? It definitely was an appearance issue. We'd like it to look better. And when you say, well, what does that mean? It's typically easy. Flowers, planters, maybe some benches. One big issue though is to fill the vacant buildings with something. And there are lots of ideas around that. And then adding more shopping opportunities and more restaurants was the next most common thing. What should we be doing but we're not doing? We already touched on it here, but offering incentives, promoting Platteville, more events, and possibly looking at bringing marijuana to town. Okay, I'm safe, all right.
We'll find out this April.
Yes, I will say that if the town board hasn't read the results of the survey, it might be interesting. It's very, yes, absolutely, we want it, absolutely not. There wasn't anything really kind of in this range, and we didn't ask a specific question about it. We didn't say, would you like or dislike, approve or disapprove. It came up sort of organically or generically.
Wasn't one of the questions that what kind of business you do not want in Platteville?
Correct. That's one of the reasons we asked that, yeah. And we got lots of great answers to that. Strip clubs, you know, we got,
Bars.
if you watched them, you saw
Bars,
them.
liquor stores, yeah.
So yes, but it does seem that there are some strong feelings. You know, from an purely economic development standpoint, it is a cash cow. It's something you shouldn't eliminate without some degree of consideration. Because if you do say no, just say no knowing what you're saying no to. If you say yes knowing what you're saying yes to, right?
I think if there's an elephant in the room, that's probably it.
It is mostly in small towns. One thing I would say is that it's been around long enough now that those businesses now have banking set up, so they no longer carry the same amounts of cash in the business. So there's no longer the same amount of crime associated with somebody trying to come in and rob the business. So there are some statistics and some, I think, lessons out there that if a community did want to explore that, they could very easily find some experts to come in and say, be careful about this, don't do this, do this. So.
But aren't we saturated with it already, with all these other communities?
You'd think so, but I have to tell you, what is it that they say in a recession? There are only two things that do well in recessions: churches and alcohol stores. I think there are now three things: churches, alcohol stores, and marijuana. They don't seem to stop the growth pattern. So, yeah, I don't know. Saturation is a great question. But I would say that if a business owner is going to invest in Platteville, that's a business owner who likely has done their homework and their demographics and that they know that they're going to be successful. Now, there's that whole question about incentivizing it. I'd incentivize a grocery store or a restaurant. I wouldn't recommend incentivizing something that the community is so divided about. But and when I said what are the barriers, when I asked the businesses what are the barriers, your approval process is too long, and there aren't any amenities to attract or to keep people in town to shop at the businesses. So that was the answer to what are the barriers. I wasn't particularly surprised by any of that, but in thinking what I read out loud, were there any surprises for you guys? Or if you did read all that fascinating data, any surprises come out of that?
I think just my perspective as far as the process. I mean, I look at other towns and their process for land use applications and site plans, and I think we're right there, if not quicker. But that's just my biased opinion because I'm the one that helps Melissa do those. But we try to. There's reasons why things get delayed. So.
Well, I will tell you that in my experience, that they will always say that. Always and forever. If your process was 24 hours, somebody would say it would take too long. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but That's all, they'll say 3 things about community development, which is this general, approval group. That it takes too long, that you have way too many regulations, and it's too costly. So, they will always say that, doesn't matter if you're the cheapest game in the area.
As far as the
yeah,
business
please.
responses we got, there's just 4 of them.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's pretty limited. But was any of it from the energy companies in town?
I don't know. I will tell you that I did personally interview some of those companies.
Okay.
So I did get personalized feedback.
Because that's, with that park over there, that's where a lot of our growth will probably come, hopefully come.
And he brings up a really great point, and that is that one of the things that you have that I think is going to serve you very, very well is you have a lot of available, appropriately zoned land ready to go. So at such point as someone might step up to the plate and say, hey, I'm really interested in looking this type of business, you have the opportunity to say, okay, we're ready to go with that. There's a word in the business you might have heard called shovel ready. If you're not familiar with that, what that means is it is literally shovel ready. It has water and sewer to the site, not necessarily on the site, because that's my job as the developer. It's got everything, the roads are ready to go, everything's ready to go. All I have to do is come in and stick my shovel in the ground and start digging my foundation. So, I think there are lots of opportunities that Platteville has. I think one of the things that potentially might be restricting for you is this concept that you have a few business owners, landowners, who do own large tracts of available land to develop. And they're under the ownership of one individual. And that can be problematic. I'm not speaking specifically to this individual because I don't know them, I don't know what the situation is. But I found that to be problematic in other towns where they might have an idea of how to develop, but that's not the town's idea. Or they may be holding on for development, but they don't have the money or partners to help them develop, and that's problematic. Or they want way too high of a price to sell their land, and that's problematic. It's always problematic when a large chunk of developable land is owned by one person, because you're at their mercy. So I'm gonna blame this on this particular let's see if it's gonna do it now. Don't touch anything.
Don't jinx it.
Don't touch anything. Okay, perfect. So, probably still can't read it. Let me make it bigger. Those of you that did take a look at the survey or had a chance to maybe read some of those other documents, is there anything else that popped out at you or struck you? Any questions you have about what we just talked about? Make sense? At any time, if you do, let me know. If something comes to you later, if you're like me, this usually happens about 2 days later, I'm like, just email me. Because I'm going to be using this data plus what we're about to do next as the basis, the guts, if you will, the backbone of the strategic plan itself. And after you give me this information tonight, it'll take me until the first part of January to create an actual document. And that's usually easier for you to look at and say, oh yeah, I see it now, or I don't like that. So that'll be your first chance to see it, is the first part of January. But what I'd like to do now is start to talk about goals and projects. So, for example, what we heard from the community in this area of economic development was that they'd like some sort of way to attract new businesses. And the business owners also suggested that they were interested in expanding. So that BEAR program was a suggestion. Those specific business opportunities, new housing and incentive program, and somehow marketing Platteville. I grouped these under this area of economic development. What I'd like to talk about and brainstorm in this particular area would be specific, tangible sorts of projects. And let me give you an example. I warned you I was going to come full circle back to the grocery store. So I've heard grocery store, and I've heard grocery store, and I've heard grocery store, and I don't disagree. Grocery store would be amazing. The issue with a grocery store is that, this is gonna sound funny when I say it first, is that you're actually gonna have to shop at that grocery store for it to be successful. And I don't know that everybody in town understands what that truly means. What it truly means in most cases is you're gonna get a small mom and pop owner who will come in and they're gonna have any number of non-perishable goods, canned goods, something that's got a shelf life of at least several months, because their turnover is not gonna be very high. They might have a small frozen section and an extremely small perishable goods section. Probably no fresh produce for a while, maybe just the basics, milk, butter, eggs at the most. What you are going to have to do is you're gonna have to pass by Hayes Market in Johnstown. You're gonna have to drive right past Safeway in Brighton. You're gonna have to come here to this mom and pop store and make sure you make it there during the hours that they are open, which may not be very convenient to you at all. And you are gonna have to spend extra money to buy your milk at this mom and pop store here in town. That's what having a grocery store in town is likely going to mean for a while. Once you get that support, a while, 8 months, 12 months, 18 months, and as they start to see that there is community support, that they can depend on that, they're going to start slowly but surely expanding to a certain point. But that's what a grocery store really means. And it may be that as that opportunity expands, a bigger name might be able to come into the market. Of course, that might mean your mom and pop goes out of business. So good and bad things about attracting a bigger name into the market. I understand that you have the opportunity to have perhaps another convenience store in town, and that type of convenience store, say a 7-Eleven, typically carries some of those same types of perishable goods and a limited grocery supply. So these are the sorts of things we'll want to consider and talk about. So if we decide that grocery store is in fact sort of a project we want to work on, then we'll have future discussions about what that actually looks like and what that commitment needs to be from the town. And when we talk about a restaurant, we'll want to talk about getting fairly specific, in terms of, it was all over the board about what kind of restaurant. Clearly, there was an issue around fast food. People would like a fast food restaurant, but there was also a very clear issue around we want sort of a family-oriented restaurant that we can go with our families like the DoubleTree to be there and participate with that. So that's what I mean when I say projects. So, when we're brainstorming...
I got a question for you.
Oh, please do. Yeah,
So,
sure.
I feel like we got some stuff happening. We got 7-Eleven's gonna have a fast food through there, and we've got, 3-4 restaurants in town already. So how do we communicate to the community or help those businesses gain that notoriety out there to say, hey, we are a family restaurant, come to us, So that's where I think that we need to focus on is because I can't see another restaurant coming into this town on top of it.
So this is economic development. Let me spell before I talk because it's going to go really bad if I don't do that. Okay. So these are exactly the types of conversations I'm hoping to have with you, because I can come in as an outsider and say, hey, we've heard grocery store, this is my idea about a grocery store, and somebody else's comment may completely change the whole conversation, which is what it should do, because you're the community, right? So to answer your question, I think that most communities have some sort of a shop local program when they're trying to implement something like the Bear. One of the things about helping a business expand or even retain that business is to promote that business as a town. There'll be a shop local week or shop local Saturday, or you'll publish it in a newsletter, or you'll put it on a website, or you'll try to build, say, a chamber of commerce or a business group like yourselves that get together and say, how can we in fact help these business owners do something like this? And it's usually, it's not expensive, it's not even that time consuming, it's an awareness issue. Facebook, social media is a big way to do that these days. Signs, banners, putting something new out front that catches your eye as you drive by. Oh, look, I didn't, literally. We'll have people in this town who said, oh, look, I didn't know that restaurant was there. And they've been living here for 4 years, I can guarantee it.
Right.
I agree. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
And actually, I don't wanna jump ahead, but under the new housing needed, Troy, when those houses were added on to Rogers Farm, do you know if they were already under contract before they were built, or did they build them and then people came in and bought them?
There's a little mixture of both, like,
Okay.
some people would buy houses once they were built, but most of them
Yeah,
were built to suit. They picked out one of their floor plans.
but that was only, what, 25 houses?
55.
Oh, 55,
55,
okay.
yeah.
Because when it comes to new housing, of course, apartment complexes are gonna fill up fast, especially with cost of living nowadays. And I'm sure with a small town like Platteville, if we had some kind of an apartment complex come in here, guaranteed we'd probably be cheaper than some places like Longmont.
Okay, I'm gonna stick this down here for a second. I wanna just flesh this out a hair bit on, this issue of a grocery store. Because your community has said that they want a grocery store, right? And I think what people have in the back of their mind as a grocery store might actually be something like a King Soopers or a Safeway or even a Hayes. And I don't think that's impossible. I just think it's gonna take a really, really long time. In my world, a really, really long time is like 15 or 20 years. So that's a long time. And the reason is because it boils down to four things. Traffic patterns. Most people don't work here. Most people that live here don't work here. So they're commuting from somewhere else. And as they drive by the Safeway or the King Soopers or the Hayes Market, that's where they stop. There is what they call an ice cream time. In the grocery world, they don't locate a store more than 10 minutes from the base of their population, because the ice cream will melt within the 10 minutes it takes you to put it in your car and drive it home. So it's the ice cream time window. And when you look at the availability of potential grocery stores within 10 minutes, it would take a lot of convincing to have someone like a big name, King Soopers, Safeway, any of those, locate a big store in this area. The third reason is really the density of your population isn't yet there. Because they look at this drive time window of this 10 minutes and they take the population there and then they say, okay, who eats away at that drive time? Is it Hayes Market? Is it the one in Brighton? And it's all of those. And then the fourth reason really is the where exactly are they gonna locate? Where people can see them, the biggest drive-by. So you're probably talking 85, and there's really no spot on 85 yet to be able to adequately locate a grocery store like that, or potentially 66. So that's why those are kind of the four reasons. If this group thinks potentially that kind of grocery store might not happen for a while, we'll need to send a message back out to your community as a whole. This probably won't happen for a while, and this is why, but these are some of the alternatives that we're considering or that we're looking at. So what would you tell me are some of those alternatives? I think I heard one, which in essence is, we have some existing, like a 7-Eleven convenience stores that can kind of fill this gap.
You got Dollar General.
Dollar General.
And then the market right by Subway, they have produce and they have a butcher. I mean, it's a pretty nice store. And I think what you said, we need to promote businesses right here and let people know that there are good things out in Platteville.
How much can the town get involved in promoting the local businesses? I mean, is there possible?
There's no law against prohibition. There is a law, a Colorado revised statute against benefiting a specific business that does not benefit the whole. But it'd be like a chamber of commerce, right?
Because we're all, it is a bedroom community. Many of us leave town in the morning, coming home at night.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us don't even drive through town.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't know it's there,
Yeah.
we don't know the businesses are in town, then we're not gonna go looking for them.
And here's something else to
Is there a
consider
chamber
that's
of
very
commerce in
true.
town?
And this is just a blanket statement, this is not something specific. But typically in small towns, the people who open up businesses in small towns, it's either a family business, and either they were sort of born into it, they come through it because their family owned it and their family owned it. They have some sort of a passion or attachment to it. but that usually does not make them great business owners, right? So anything that you could do to help them understand how to market themselves better, how to maybe create a web page or Facebook presence, or how to market, how to have coupons for the local town, how to stay open on certain days. And one of the comments in the survey was about more events. If the town can drive more events in the downtown area and have that business owner stay open during those events, these are all some really common, tried and true ways to help local business owners. I know Troy and the town board and I were all talking about the Small Business Development Center and how they can help our small business owners. So I know the town's already doing any number of things to reach out. You're standing up, that usually means that I've done something wrong.
No.
Yeah.
Go back to what Mike asked about the town promoting business. That's one thing Adrian and I have already talked about, is in the next 2 months while she's working on the marketing brochure to market Platteville. Right below that, I'm gonna put together basically a Platteville business book that we can distribute to the community. So, and it's not just the storefront businesses. We have a lot of home occupation businesses where people like, I use John Jameson, a friend of mine, for example. He has an excavation business, but he doesn't have a storefront. So things like that, and getting that in the next 2 months, calling every one of those business owners, getting their permission, asking them if it's okay, blah, blah, blah. That we have to be equal with everybody. I can't favor the DoubleTree over the cracked egg, so on and so forth.
So make it like a directory or?
Basically a
yellow
directory.
pages?
So when new people move in and they do, houses change, homeowners change, we hand that out to them as part of their welcome packet, along with other stuff that we give out regarding the schools, the fire district, utilities, so on and so forth.
Well, when we send out our utility bills and our letters from the town manager, that type of thing, I mean, is that an opportunity for us to spotlight all the businesses that we do have here in town that are available for people to shop, or is that stepping
As long as we're
beyond the
equal,
boundaries?
I think as long as we're equal, if I wanted to, send out in January newsletter along with my message that, hey, let's recognize these businesses, and I list all of them without excluding anybody, and that they want business, they're openly publicized, I think that'd be fine.
And I also think, to your point, you could say 1 month you could do grocery stores, stores that carry food
Like
products or
categories.
something, that category. And the next time you could deal with a different type of business, where to get gas in town, or all of those types of things,
People are always looking for daycare, for example, that's on next door, who's out there for daycare. I see stuff like, how do I find nachos at midnight, stuff like that. I mean, good luck with that.
Troy's house.
I've seen, I'm gonna put these words up here to remind myself, I've seen what I call did you know campaigns.
Yeah.
Did you know that you can get whatever, ice cream in Platteville, and here's where to get it? Did you know that you can buy homemade cookies in Platteville, and here's where you can get it? Sort of the did you know campaign. What I will say is that it is, to your point, it is much easier for some sort of association to do this kind of marketing. And what I found is usually the first 2 or 3 times that you do it, your business owners are a bit skeptical, right? Yeah, no, that's never gonna work. I'm not gonna bother, whatever. And then when they see that it actually does have some degree of results, then they become more involved. Usually what I try to do first is I try to go around and say, hey, fill out this little form, and basically it says the name of your business, and what you're doing and what specials you're gonna have during the month of November or December, whatever month it is you're dealing with. And we will, if you get that back to us by a certain day, we will put it into our utility bill. We'll put it on the board of town hall, we'll put it on next door, whatever it is you're doing to market that. And you the first time you might get 4 or 5, and then all of a sudden when they figure out that we're actually moving forward with it. But it's much easier for a group like this, like an association or even a loosely formed group, to do that, as opposed to the town to drive that.
And there's small marketing. I just went back to my hometown for Thanksgiving, and and my dad used to work for the town government. What they do is they give all their employees bonuses, but it's in business bucks. They're coupons, so you only shop locally. You know, and you can expand that to where, you know, you kind of tell people, kind of force them. It's like, well, if you want to use this, you got to use it here in Platteville. So, you know, go to the DoubleTree, go get some gas, go get some burritos, whatever the case may be. And that's just a small way of helping your businesses out, and you're not being selective. It can be used anywhere. So, little things like that, I think, would go a long way.
Absolutely, and you know, this whole concept of a social media presence, I know you guys are heavy on Nextdoor, but I've seen some really great campaigns on Facebook where it's just, you put all the business names in a hat, you randomly draw one, and that's the one that you profile this week. And you have a photo and a little bit about the business, and you just send it out there on Facebook. This sort of thing does take a little bit of extra time and energy, but other than that, once the idea is you want to get the business owners themselves to do this.
We're talking about businesses marketing themselves and getting involved in the community too.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a perfect example, the Silver Spur, and I'll bring them up.
This isn't a negative example, is it?
No.
I like positive examples.
No.
Okay.
No, for the last 2 years, they have provided food to everyone at the community center for the Christmas festival, and they're gonna do it again next weekend for the 3rd year. And that's a humongous advertisement for them. Because when I get in front of the microphone and tell everyone there, hey, guess what? Silver Spur provided all this food for free for everyone, go support them.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's a big boost.
And hopefully they're seeing, businesses do this for all sorts of reasons. I say return on investment like it's money, but it's not always money. These businesses are here because they like it here. You know, there are reasons they're here beyond just making some sort of a profit. They want to give back to the community. So I love the fact that you're recognizing that.
So as a town, I mean, are we able to try to bring get one of these associations going? Because we used to have a much more active chamber of commerce in this town years ago, and probably due to, you know, losing businesses or whatever, it's kind of gone by the wayside.
Seemed like when the housing market went away, the chamber kind of went away.
Yeah.
So 7, 08.
Yeah, my recommendation on that is that I think the town can be of significant support. They can offer you meeting spaces, probably. I don't want to speak for the town, but probably they can offer you meeting spaces. They can probably offer notification services. But typically it works much better if the town is just a support function, and that people like yourselves say, hey, we want to form an association. I volunteer to call the first meeting. Who else wants to be there? Kind of a thing. And that the town just provides some sort of backup support. I find that if it's perceived as, or in fact is town driven, there are things you can't do then. For example, you couldn't ask for $5 from each of the businesses to, you know, send out marketing literature about them, because the town can't do that. But you guys could. So I find it works better that way. It's not that the town couldn't, it's just that it doesn't seem very as functional. But I wrote that down, an association or chamber. So I want to kind of wrap this one up and touch on the others as we're going through. So what I wrote down around economic development was, as far as a grocery does, maybe where we should start, and keep in mind, this plan should be a living document. So a year from now, when you get back together and you've promoted the existing businesses that do have grocery style products in them, hopefully they're seeing the benefit from that, and maybe even more people are carrying different types of grocery style products. Spotlighting possibly in the utility bill, come back to the apartment complex issue. I wrote down the Small Business Development Center because that was on my list to remember. Maybe forming an association or chamber focused on local businesses. Some sort of shop local program, definitely the business book. A welcome packet I wrote down because I didn't know y'all were doing a welcome packet. I think that's important. Business bucks is an opportunity. The did you know? And I think that's all around this business expansion, attraction, retention, possibly some new business opportunities, marketing Platteville. And I love the fact that you just didn't say, oh, let's market Platteville outside, which is one thing, but let's market Platteville to the people who already live here. I think that's a great idea. An incentive program is usually a town board approved program, but we can talk a little bit about what that may entail or what that may look like. The problem with incentive programs is you typically either A, have to have some sort of seed money, if you're doing, say, a facade program, or there has to be some sales tax generated in order to share back with the business that's coming to town. Around this new housing that's needed, Chris mentioned sort of maybe an apartment complex might be an opportunity. Do you see other opportunities as this group around new types of housing that are needed?
Where would you put it?
Melissa?
Are a lot of towns landlocked like this town with all them billionaires on one side and?
I don't think we have a problem with billionaires yet.
That'd be an awesome problem to have, wouldn't it?
You got Excel, you got Magnus, you
Yeah.
got LG Everest, I mean, they're all billionaires.
Well,
They
good
own
point.
that side,
Good point.
so we can only kind of go that way or up the hill.
Yeah.
Having the land annexed, currently annexed and ready to go for development is a challenge. I know you guys have been working a lot on trying to get more space.
Well, we have along I-66 out there.
Yeah, there's only a few parcels left that can be developed for family, multifamily, for example, Nick Christo's openly trying to sell his 11 acres over on the west side of the ball fields. So I've been talking to a developer about multifamily, apartment buildings in there, duplexes, whatever feasibly makes their financial plan work. Water is the biggest hindrance.
Yeah.
Water dedication is by far the biggest hindrance to development in Platteville.
Because it's so expensive?
So expensive, because we require CBT at $60,000 a unit.
Can we get rid of that at all, or is it set to deal?
We have to find water somewhere before we can get rid of it.
We are looking at other water sources, but they're restricted water sources.
Did we ever pick up those shares 8, 10, 12 months ago?
All right, y'all, hold on a second here. If I'm gonna get you through this tonight, the detail is gonna have to, I know that's the important part, but I can't do it yet tonight.
Oh,
Because one of the things I'm gonna have you do yet tonight, after we get done with this, so I'm gonna move you along a little bit quicker, is I'm gonna ask you to tell me what your most important one of these on this list is. So we're gonna come full circle back to that, you're gonna vote on it, literally. So, anything else under economic development you want me to toss up here? Knowing that this is our beginning point and we'll move on. So the next one, as you can see from the screen up there, was the issue around environment. And, you know, the comp plan and the survey both talked about this issue of the oil and gas and the opportunities there. But then the survey also mentioned a lot around the agricultural heritage, and the interviews I did too talked a lot about the ag base and also this railroad access. Are there any specifics, any ideas, any thoughts you can throw out here, any projects that you think would be good for the town to pursue under this category of environment?
I think a farmer's market.
That also sort of coincides with the event concept. We could bring people to town or near town. Because you have that wonderful, remind me again, is it Heritage Days? Harvest Days, thank you, I knew it started with H. And that might be something you can add to or expand on as well with the farmer's market.
Parks, Trails, and Trees Committee is working on a farmer's market next summer.
Perfect, we'll get an update from them. Anything else you can think around here? I know that the oil and gas opportunities, as we said, wax and wane. I do know that you have some buildings and some land that works very well for them. I know the access to 85 works very well for them. Are there any ways you can think of to enhance those opportunities for them?
Well, I think one thing that, talk about oil and gas, that we have, I don't know how many people work up there, maybe 300 people work at Underdarko during the day. So we, you know, a lot of people can go out to work, but a lot of people come here to go to work. So that's an opportunity, I think, for us to try to capture just how we do
We
that.
talk about food and restaurants and something to do on my lunch break and,
Yeah.
yeah.
Fast food and coffee shops with Anadarko ones.
Yes, fast food and coffee shops.
Tell them to pay for it.
Let me write coffee shop up here.
Coffee and ice cream.
One of the
All right.
things, one of the things that oil and gas, companies are always looking for is a way to PR their corporation. One of them is that they come to us as a fire department and look for opportunities to buy equipment. Somehow the town should be able to capitalize on that, I think, especially with the people we have in and around this town. Somehow to get a PR, again, this could be a chamber thing, I think, but.
You mentioned Harvest Daze, Cheryl. I mean, you know, just like you just said that PDC, Anadarko, FR Clothing, a lot of those oil and gas support companies, they sponsor fireworks, they sponsor the golf tournament, you know, bounce houses, because they want to get their name out there, and which is great because it you know, it helps us do things we otherwise couldn't do.
And these are your type of people too, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, these are people who don't dress up to go to work, these are people who understand how to work, these are people who have similar values and ethics for the most part, that the town seems to.
I know every year,
Somewhere over there.
last few years, they've been doing a barbecue in the park for the businesses.
Yep.
And trying to attract those people to come down and let them know how much they appreciate them. And if they can expand upon that, maybe, you know, look at businesses like Anadarko, take it to them and say, you're a big business here, this is what we'd like to do for you as a town, for all your employees today.
Anything around agriculture?
I think we have some fairly large farmers around the area that I don't know if we can help promote, or I don't know how that works. I mean, I'm from farm country, and where I come from, they just want to be left alone. So it just depends on that dynamic, I guess.
I think it does, and I don't think you have any centennial farms adjacent to Platteville. I don't think you do.
I think most of our farms around here are growing
Like for
cattle
farmers
feed
market.
and dairy, so
Mhm.
that's our big things with all the dairies around here. So maybe market around some kind of a dairy theme.
Well, yeah, you might even have, there are all sorts of, you know, fun ways you can do things like, I know a lot of the school kids take a tour now of ag-based industries like farms or dairies, because the schools want to get them reconnected to where things actually happen and how you actually get your milk that's in your grocery store. This is what it looks like. And I do know that the sort of farm tour or heritage farm tours are really big in terms of tourism. So I think you might have some opportunities there. It sounds like, and you're right, most farmers are just like, I'm just farming, leave me alone, and I'm really busy, and I got up at 5 a.m. today, and why are you bothering me? But that might be, there might be one or two farmers out, or farmers, the younger generation that's coming through college right now, that's gonna come back to the farm, that might be a good opportunity.
I think if you use a farmer's market maybe to promote your farm and your agriculture in the area, that might be a good tie-in, because that's,
And
Miller's Market, they do, you know, all the.
you know, Miller's Market, Burgers
Miller's
Farm,
Market
and
is in
all
Platteville,
those.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, cause we do have one big farm, Miller's Market, and
Yeah.
they're huge, I mean,
Yeah.
it's.
And they go elsewhere to other farmers markets and.
Well, they've done a lot, they do a lot of farming.
They've been around for over 60 years.
Well, there's honey.
Huh?
People all over the place that sell
Yeah.
honey at the farm.
Those honey
Hold up, you guys, one at a
Yeah, for
time.
years.
Up, one at a time, Melissa.
Yeah, the fact that we, as a town, are very accommodating of industrial and agricultural uses, I think really unique.
Yeah.
Because they often run into, you know, we don't want your stinky, smelly, ugly thing here.
Yep.
And we like stinky, smelly, ugly things.
Maybe not.
I wouldn't quite phrase it, I know what you mean though, and that's, you know, and I think that's part
It's
of
our
what makes
characteristic.
you, yeah, it's your differentiator, right? All right, let's see if we can move on to the next one. And keeping in mind, you're gonna have to vote soon. This issue of growth management. To me, in terms of the survey, that was really location. And part of that location obviously is the access, which is both good and bad, 85, 66 issues, traffic issues. Without really limiting yourselves too much, as in we all know we have CDOT, we have the railroad, and we just talked about water as an infrastructure issue as well. What are some ideas in this area of growth management that you can think of that might be good to have this plan address? We can't do anything about the cost of CBT, but I heard say there might be some other alternative sources for us, so we'll leave that one up on the board there. What else can you think of? Obviously, we're gonna market your location. That's a big deal. When we're doing the marketing brochure, we're gonna market your location.
Zoning regulations,
More or less different?
just they need to meet what's on the ground. I mean, that's why we revamped zoning so much in the last 10 years is when we did our comp plan update initially back in 2010 and then we revised all of our zoning regulations, they were too urbanized. That's
Yeah.
why in 15-16, Melissa and Martin Landers, they revamped the comp plan and a lot of our zoning to make it more practical. We did away with landscaping on Main Street, for example, because nobody can landscape on Main Street. It's all concrete.
Yeah, without ripping everything up.
I mean, so we made it a lot more practical.
Well, I mean, this is my phrase, we are who we are, but I think that's one of your selling points, right? You're practical, pragmatic. Okay.
The barrier here is a great location. So Troy talked about it at one of the meetings that in 15, 20 minutes you're anywhere you want to go. That's the biggest barrier to most of this, is that I live in Gilchrist. I go to Greeley
Yeah.
for everything, because I'm 10 minutes away from it or 20 minutes. Even if they had a mom and pop shop in that town, the same thing would happen here. So we've got to try to think about how to take that barrier away and make it easier for them to stay here and shop or whatever it might be, but I don't know the answer, I'm just pointing out the obvious.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if I worked out of town, I probably would stop somewhere on the way back that's easy and convenient and
Or if
open
you-
at 7 p.m.
I shop somewhere else, so while I'm in town, I'm gonna stop and get groceries and do the shop.
One thing I've heard about a grocery store is the key to that is to have a fresh deli, number one, and number two, a pharmacy component. And that would keep them here, because so many people, I run into Greeley, they're going to the grocery store, but the reason they're driving for us is they're picking up their meds.
Yeah. Yep.
So if we can keep them here,
So like a Walgreens or
like a
something.
Walgreens, or I think Hayes Market has a pharmacy component, I'm not sure if they do or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Let's look back at what this town had at one time and what we don't now. I mean, look how many businesses we had in this town that aren't here now.
Yeah.
You know, we had a parts store, we had a hardware store, we had a drugstore, we had a, yeah, why is that? So why is that? It's because economics, you know,
The big box stores took
they
away.
couldn't make it, you know?
It's just
But,
like gas stations, you know. The
Well,
old-time
it's
gas stations, it's easier.
It is actually more than just economics. Most of those, some of those, most of them typically are run, they're not necessarily a mom and pop brand name, but they're run by a family, sort of a family business. And the kids don't want it, and they can't figure out how to sell it, and so they sort of fade off into the distance. If there is a way that we can help them, say with what they call succession planning, who's gonna buy your business? Do you have it set up in a way that makes it easy to buy? You know, are you using a professional accountant for your taxes, so it's easy for me to see what your profit and loss statements are? All of those things kind of go into play. It's not always just economics, and I would be very surprised if we went and talked to these individuals who are in town and, you know, said what keeps you in business, or why are you still in business, how are you being successful, that it would be just driven by money. My guess is there's a lot of what we're talking about next, community character involved in that. Speaking of which, what are your ideas around this, these things that are so important? That obviously the small town feel, we defined what that was. Family friendly, the lifestyle, the historic buildings, what are some of your ideas around what the town can do to preserve, maintain, achieve, enhance this community character?
I think Paul's a good example of what he's doing with his building downtown. He's renovating it, keeping it, that character the way it looks.
He's gonna grow some marijuana, soda.
Yeah, way to go, Paul.
Just don't expect a pot shop in here, Paul.
And Adrian, wasn't there like a matching grant or something through CSU or something with the historic buildings, is that?
Yes, and it's difficult because our historic buildings have been changed.
Okay.
So to actually keep the historical part of their title, that's what the difficulty is that everyone's running into.
Okay.
Building or houses?
Buildings. Too many buildings in town that are very old have been modified to a point where they no longer qualify for historical site.
Right.
I tried that a couple years ago at the museum, once they added on the new addition, they blew that, so,
Like you have the bank and.
yep.
And I do know that there are levels to this historic, a lot of towns just have a town designation. This is a historic building, and they recognize it as important historically. Not that the actual structure or pieces of the structure are still historic, but that it's an important building historically to the town, and you do plaques, and you do a little walking brochure. And then the levels increase dramatically from there, all the way up to this federal designation where you cannot literally change the color of the paint on your building without federal approval. Don't do that, by the way, that never turns out well. But, so somehow, preserving that historical building. How about this issue of downtown improvements? Remember I had mentioned that it was almost all about appearance. Flowers and signs and generally, I'm losing y'all, okay.
And even the sidewalks still downtown are,
Yeah, there's a.
We're slowly getting some traction. XL Energy finally admitted that they'll start doing some underground in the spring, summer. But I think once people see things changing, it'll gain some attention.
You have to see to believe sometimes, a lot of times.
Getting Main Street involved. And going back to the growth management part, Cheryl,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just Union Pacific. CDOT is a huge player that controls a lot of what we can do in Platteville, because they control Main Street, Vasquez, of course, 85 and 66.
Is the town still trying to get Main Street?
We're still
When
trying.
it comes to something like a pharmacy, real quick, for example, Troy, do we have a way to find out demographically, like what percentage of the population here are senior citizens?
Oh, yeah, all that's on the
Yeah,
US Census.
because when it comes to senior citizens, especially if they have a hard time driving great distances, having something like a pharmacy in town,
Right.
that's a huge plus for them.
And there's some economic info about pharmacies that works really well when you have them associated with, say, a larger grocery store. If it's a smaller grocery store, it doesn't work as well because, again, what you said earlier, Paul, almost all of the generics are now online orders because you can get a 3-month order at a time. And unless there's something, again, a differentiator, and it might be, especially people of a certain age, do prefer to do their business in person. So that might be the differentiator that you're able to survive with a pharmacy. But a pharmacist is an exceptionally highly paid individual because the risks that they take.
We have a lot of seniors at our senior center, they don't even own a computer. They don't like, yeah, they hardly own an iPhone.
Okay, I'm gonna have to move us on to Parks and Rec really quick so that you can vote before our time is up this evening. So I wrote down the main things that I had heard out of the survey, which was an activity, a rec center, the splash park, trails. Anything else that you can think of in terms of an actual sort of physical amenity in this area?
is there any access to the river? I mean,
We're close.
we're really close.
Sure, bushwhack a little bit.
Next Tuesday with LG Everest about dedication.
Camp owns a lot of that down
What
there.
about like, not amphitheater isn't the right
Make it happen.
idea, but sort of that
Stage, maybe?
stage or an area that could be a gathering place for the community for multi-purpose reasons?
Oh, yeah, God, I wish we had a fairgrounds or some kind here.
Fairgrounds?
Oh, what?
Some kind of fairground where we could have concerts or whatever the case might be.
Amphitheater.
Everybody, we talked about a rec district.
I'm gonna misspell amphitheater, but I think you get the idea.
Oh, singing stage.
That's his wife.
And can we be super specific, like pickleball courts?
Of course.
Okay.
Alright, so let me explain the rules. The rules are as follows. You're gonna get 1 dot. It's green. You stick this over here. Can you turn the lights back on for me, sir? Thank you. Your 1 green dot is first gonna go over here under this community character. So as you look at that board that says community character, what is the one thing that's most important to you personally? You cannot rip your dot in half. You cannot put your dot halfway through. You have to put your dot squarely. You've heard these before from me, right? You have to put your dot squarely. You can steal dots, they peel off. You can also sell your dots, if that's important to you. Feel free. Dots to the highest bidder. What I'm looking for is to see if there's any general agreement on what's most important for the town to focus on. Do not let anybody influence you. When you're done, come get your second green dot over here by growth management. Just keep walking and I'll have you put a green dot on growth management. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead, sir. Watching that one first, so.
Feel like this is communion or something, right? Here's the wafer, here's the body of the town of Platteville. You're moving on to economic development. Yeah. Bless you, my daughter, bless you.
We need a lot more of this.
That's pretty much
Sorry.
And I like the little over the door.
Keep moving, people. Keep moving. You can add to it if you think of something, that's no problem.
I think it's, there's a,
There's another one, we'll need another green dot, yes. there's
Oh,
another.
I better get those.
Okay, as long as you promise not to put 2 on 1. Oh, that's good, the fox in the hen house thing going on?
It was pending, so I guess it didn't.
You need a green dot. You need a green dot. You need a green dot. It's fun to see people's different things. Melissa, do you need a green dot?
I have one.
Oh, you've got one, okay, because you'll need another one for economic development next. Another one for economic development next. How you guys doing? Any more green dots needed on this side of the? Good.
What is this last word?
accommodating,
Oh, Troy mentioned that we're very accommodating of these light industrial uses, and that's kind of a differentiator. That's what sets us apart. We might be able to capitalize on that.
That's true.
More green dots? More green dots? That's gonna go right here. Let's move this one over this way. Let me. Another green dot for you, ma'am?
Yeah, it's like I have to be contrary.
124, sir.
Well, these acreages run at 124.
Another green dot? Keep it moving, people. That does not mean, obviously, that these other ideas aren't good ideas. It just means that we have to focus somehow, and this is how we're going to choose to focus. You thought you were done. You're not. You're now on to blue dots, because I have 6 minutes left. Blue dot is your number 2.
Number 2.
You cannot vote for the same thing as you did for number 1. Blue dot is number 2.
What if I really liked it?
You did already vote for it. That's how you showed me you liked it so much. Same exact concept. I should probably just give each one of you your own little dot sheets.
okay, good, we're not gonna.
Don't mess around.
Whoa, that's dangerous.
Share your,
Giving
rest of
Share
y'all
your
kind of
sheets.
forward.
How do you like that? Say that 3 times fast. Share your sheet, share your sheets. Blue dots.
And Michael showed
Blue dots.
Blue dots are your number 2.
I need a blue dot. I need several.
Oh, here, take that sheet. Melissa, number 2, as long as you're over here, just do your number 2.
Alright, I'll start back.
You're not gonna peel them off for me?
I will if you really want me to.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm
Oh, wait.
thoughtless. What? What is that? Facade grants.
Need blues, gentlemen?
They're actually gonna have two.
It is, and even.
Get the front stores to fix up their, yeah. They do have specific grants
Any more blue
for
dots needed?
buildings
Yes,
specific
Good drive,
historical.
You got that vote. They have the speaker.
May I have your dot sheet? One more, yep.
Blue dot.
I just did their
More
inspection.
blue dot.
You got that one already?
What? Oh, oops.
Ooh, I should not have put Curtis in charge of the dots. That was probably a really
Thank you.
Why did I?
You know, how did I get stuck with this?
Why don't I? That'll be $100. You always wanted to.
Great.
Makes me so.
We have one last task for tonight.
There's blue dots.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
This is over. I'm gonna have to repeel them and restick them. And combine my dot sheets.
Still working hard, Mike, or you guys slowing down a bit?
Oh, here, you know, usually everybody blown their budgets by now, but they got money yet to spend.
All right, if you have a pen, like our normal writing pen, now would be a good time to drag it out. If you do not, I have writing pens with me. The idea that we're going to do next, and I'll wait to fully explain it until we have everybody. Pen? Pen? Just in case.
An inspector without a pen.
That's a lovely pen you have, sir. It's a lovely pen.
I could put it up for bid.
Oh, wow.
30 cents would be about it. So I'm going to take a quick look here and see what we've got. What I'm going to ask you to do is to write down one goal associated with this economic development strategic plan. It can be any kind of goal in any area that you want. It's usually the first thing that comes to mind. And the way goals are typically written is they start with a verb. Expand, build, create, purchase, develop. There's a goal that starts the sentence. And the goals are typically really big picture. We're going to develop a business expansion and retention program. And there's always a date. So the date's going to be by 2020. If you can be specific, that's awesome. By September 2020 would be great, as specific as you want to get. 2020 is fine with me. But it's usually pretty big picture. And it might even be more big picture than that. If you're the type of person who thinks this way, it might be our goal is to attract new retail businesses to Platteville's downtown, increasing retail sales tax by 20% by 2021. Just throwing a couple out there for you, right? It could be around marketing, it could be around this issue of water, it could be around the appearance of the downtown. It sounds like you guys are fairly in alignment on what's most important. Promoting existing businesses, it could be creating a business association or creating a chamber. Some descriptor is helpful. So if you're going to say, for example, we're going to be establishing a new chamber of commerce, some descriptor of that chamber of commerce is useful. It could be a descriptor along the line of a functional, a self-sustaining, a inclusive, a welcoming, some sort of adjective in there is always helpful. Paul's already got this done.
them, so I didn't.
You're writing a goal.
Okay.
And it can be in any one of these areas. If you come up with 4 or 5 goals, that's fine by me, right? But I do need one, and they almost always start with a verb. So we're enhancing, we're creating, we're developing, we're establishing, we're building, we're purchasing, we're something, we're verbing something.
Can I have a pen, please?
Oh,
Oh, thank you.
yes, you may have a pen. You may keep these pens, by the way. Lovely little branding pen.
Right, nice.
They have this little, if you haven't discovered that, the new ones have this little plastic dot on the top of them that you have to pull off before you can actually write. I'm just warning those of you who are wondering why the pen's not writing. That's right, that works for me. You're fine. And if you don't mind, when you're done, I'm going to collect them and I'm going to read them out loud really quick. From my perspective, no idea is a bad idea. What I'm likely to do is take them and try to fit them into an appropriate area, fit them into an appropriate sequence. I might change the words just a hair bit, but you should be able to recognize your own goal when you see it, when it shows up in the written plan. So, if you're done, I will take them. If you're not done, feel free to continue working. So what we've just done tonight, by the way, thank you. Are both sides fair game?
Yeah.
Okay. What we've just done tonight, based on this survey data, is have you all give me some additional ideas or maybe some more well-developed ideas, and then tell me what you think is the most important. All of these ideas are going to show up on your implementation plan because we don't want to lose track of them. It's just that these few ideas are going to be the ones that we concentrate our time and attention around. If you've written a goal that doesn't clearly align, not to worry. We can address that in our next series of meetings. So everybody's, that's a vague one. Okay, let me read a few of these out loud. In no particular order, and since I have no idea whose handwriting this is, you guys will probably know who wrote this, right? Redevelop Main Street downtown and local business appearances to create more profits for businesses and revenue for town by 2023. Nicely done. Starts with a verb, has a date, very specific. Like it. Create more outdoor recreational activities for all citizens of Platteville by 2021. Nice. Big cross mark on the back. Enhancing the look and feel around town, recognizing our local business owners for their community contributions. Nice. Improving existing businesses by 2022. Nice. Get more water and grants. Get more water grants, but that meant and. I got it. Nice. Develop a marketing plan to strategically seek business and development within the town. Lovely, very specific. This is very nice handwriting, but it's super small. Sorry. Create retail opportunities for new and existing businesses by 2022. Develop a plan to generate interest in our downtown businesses. So there's a lot of focus on your downtown here. One of the reasons I like doing this sort of silently is because it's interesting to see what ends up being important. Find additional water source by 2023. Expand existing businesses in Platteville by 30% by 2025. Create a program that allows oil and gas companies to promote local businesses by the end of 2020. Nice. That was super specific. I like it.
If these businesses knew what we were trying to do for them.
Yeah. So it's really clear to me what ends up being really important to you as this particular group. And I know that not all of us are here. So what I'm going to do, again, is I'm going to take all this information, I'm going to put it in writing. It might look a little rough at first. The plan might not be as graphically designed as it will be in the end. But you'll see something out of me by early January. And what we'll be able to do with that is at our next meeting, we'll be able to have a conversation around those ideas, because some of the other things that came up in the survey are going to end up in that plan too. And what you guys will want to do for me at that point is say, yep, we're on track. If we do this, if we accomplish what's in this plan, we will have accomplished our economic development vision and our goals. We will have done what we set out to do, and Platteville will be a better place because of it. So that's the whole point of our process today. I just want to talk super briefly about our next meeting and what that entails. So our next meeting is going to be either your choice. It might be both, depending. I have a January 16th date set aside and a January 23rd date set aside here at Town Hall, same time, 6 o'clock. Is it okay with you if we hold both those dates just in case? 16th and the 23rd, I know they're only a week apart, but if we need them, we've got them, and if we don't need them, you will see this plan come out at least 10 days in advance. So you'll see it no later than the 6th of January. So Troy will see it before then. Make sure I didn't really mess anything.
I'll proofread.
Thank goodness somebody proofreads my work. And then our second community meeting is the first part of February. I just want to mention that really quick because we had talked potentially about changing Saturday, Sunday. Right now it's set for February 1st.
Is that a Saturday?
I believe that is a Saturday.
First one's on a Sunday, the second one on a Saturday.
Is February 1st on a Saturday?
It
Oh,
is.
It is, okay, good. Then we got it right. February 1st. Do we want it generally the same time frame, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
I believe so.
Does that sound like a plan? All right.
You wanna do it, like, cause that's in the middle of the day, if you do it like in the morning, then people have the rest of the day to go do things, or,
I'm open.
We can do it whenever you think the community would be most likely to attend. It'll only be about 2 hours, so it'll be they'll see the plan then. They'll see it in all its beautiful and
I
glorious.
think a 10 to 12 would be better than doing
10 to
it
12?
from a 1 to 3
On a what day?
on a Saturday.
Okay. We can, my day is your day, so whatever you guys need, I'll be happy to do. All right. Any questions, anything else I can do for you today? Thank you for your time. That was great. It's so much fun to see this happen and all come together, and I really appreciate you writing the goals for me. If you have anything else to send my way, please do. You'll see some more stuff with me. I'll skip Christmas week, right? I won't bother you then, but you'll see a little bit from me before Christmas week, and then the plan right after Christmas week.
And thank you for dinner, Mary.
As always.
Thanks for coming.
Y'all have a great night. I will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Good, how are you?